I think what really needs a round of applause is the Naked City.
Yeah.
2 years. Like, I remember like the Desolate Angel Coffee House and all those days of 5 people sitting around in this room trading off songs and opening up the newspapers and writing songs about what was happening that day. Like, here's today's newspaper. And, well, the headlines have changed a little bit. Like, everybody's been talking about this, this war out in this, I don't know, this remote place out here. Yeah, but the real story, I think, is right here. It didn't really make the headlines as much as other places. It says, Hasbro to take over Tonka. The world's biggest toy maker, Hasbro Incorporated of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, will take over the Tonka Corporation. It says the story is on page 37. Now, if we turn over to page 37, we find out that Hasbro better watch out because Mattel and Nintendo have formed an alliance. And they've got the high-tech toys too. You know, they've got Mario Brothers and stuff. I mean, what is Hasbro going to do? What are they going to do? Watch these Scud Lincoln logs? I mean, come on.
Hasbro is getting G.I. Joe.
So anybody going to any of these demonstrations around the country, like down in D.C.? I was down in D.C. On the 6th. January 16th happens to be my birthday, the day the bombing started. And I figured, you know, like any good political satirist, should get a award for his birthday. But George, you shouldn't have, you know. Like, what I want to know, George, is like, do you still have the receipt? Can I take it back? You know. This is a song about the demonstrations that were going on while I was there. Well, I went down to D.C. just to see what I could see. Lots of people shouting for peace, facing the cops off in the streets. Well, they were eyeball to eyeball, their teeth were gnashed. I said, I don't want none of that. I just showed up to sign Barbara's cast. Wanted to write no oil war on it. You know, stop the bombing. Well, the cops and the demonstrators were lined up on the street, all the way down the street, facing off one another. And I looked around, I said, hey, this looks like a good time to organize a game of Red Rover, Red Rover. But now the cops said they didn't want to play. I don't know why they had us outnumbered anyway. They had their helmets on, and they had big old horses, but they could let the horses play. They had us outnumbered 2-1 then. They had handguns too, they were armed. Red Rover with handguns. That's Washington. Well, this counter demonstrator, a pro-war guy, said we should nuke Iraq, and he'd tell me why. Because if we don't fight for our freedom, then we just might lose it. And if I said one more word, he'd shove his fist down my throat just to prove it. He was a freedom fighter. Made me swell with patriotic pride. Hemorrhage, that is. I bled red, white, and blue all the way to the hospital. Well, where are we? Well, I wanted to ask George himself about the war, but they wouldn't let me in the White House door. See, I wanted to ask him about his plans, so I had to go to his nearest neighbor. He was a homeless man. That's right, the nearest neighbor to the President of the United States is a homeless man. And he said that George stopped by all the time to borrow a cup of foreign policy. But now the homeless guy didn't have any of that, so he gave him a bottle of Thunderbird instead. Well, a couple of bottles later, George came up with that New World Order stuff. That's right, you can blame the homeless for this war. See, I was sleeping out in the park too. You can blame me for the war too. I'll take the blame. Can't we stop it? Now, a bunch of these rainbow types gathered out in front of the White House, and they began to chant, they began to shout, and they started banging on this peace drum. Looked very much like that one, except it was tie-dyed. It would not stop till it finally woke George up, and he looked over at Barbara and said, That drum's giving me a sleepless fit. Well, I'd stop the war if those guys would just quit. So he came out and said, okay, you guys have won. I'll stop the war if you guys will just stop banging on that darn drum. But the deadhead said, without missing a beat, hey man, like, we don't care if you can't sleep. We'll bang on this till you go deaf. You got no right to tell us how to express ourselves. Of course, the newspaper was standing right there and interviewed the guy. George came out and said, okay, start the bombing of Lafayette Park. That's how the war started. I should know, I was there, I saw the whole thing. So the cops were in riot gear on the street. There were snipers on the rooftop pointing machine guns at me. Somebody said we should liberate Kuwait and make it free. I said, yeah, that's all right, but can't we first liberate D.C.? That's where the real war is. I should know I'm a veteran. I enlisted. Won't you guys enlist with me?